Did you see this NBC interview with John Fetterman, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, and it was interesting because I had just finished reading the New Yorker piece by Rebecca Traister on Fetterman.
I know. I have this printed out here. I read part of it yesterday.
And she went through,
right.
and she had obviously interviewed him before this. She went through the whole closed captioning thing. And she said, like, this is not a cognitive issue. This is a communication issue. I mean, it's really like more or less like wearing like a hearing aid.
Yes,
in this instance,
exactly.
I mean, it serves the exact same sort of function in terms of, and I think there's every reason to believe that this is also a temporary situation for him. But even if it's not, it's like, I don't know, it's like glasses.
Right.
I mean, it is just like this is the way that it's easier for him to communicate in this particular instance, as opposed to he doesn't understand what is being trying to be communicated. It's just the method of communication has to be slightly different at this point, and probably will go away soon. But the way that NBC, I mean, look, and I don't know, I kept seeing Chris Matthews' name. Is Chris Matthews back?
Oh yeah, do you want to watch that clip, Sam?
Yeah, let's watch that clip, because first of all, understand what's going on here. Chris Matthews is from Pennsylvania, and there is no doubt in my mind he is nervous about John Fetterman, because his whole sort of like Pennsylvania crew, I think Fetterman is not a part of. And that's what's going on here too. Remember, this is the guy who said that if Bernie wins, he's afraid that he's going to be shot in a show trial in Central Park. That's what Chris Matthews said. He said that.
Yeah,
I thought he like lost his job for that. I guess he's back now.
Well, and also for being like he had some sexual harassment allegations against him as well.
No.
Yeah, and also apparently he also I think had a pretty like kind of contentious and sort of kind of like he kind of just like lambasted Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris when he interviewed them. Like it was a lot of like hectoring and sexually and otherwise. Yeah. So yeah, but he's back.
Play that Chris Matthews.
Transparent.
And we're going to talk to Dasha Burns a little bit later in the show about that interview with John Fetterman. Chris Matthews, what's your read on the state of this race? Dr. Oz has been closing ground, and how much the stroke suffered by John Fetterman might play into a voter in that intimacy of the voting booth saying, well, maybe I don't love Dr. Oz, but I do have concerns maybe about Fetterman's health.
Well, you're saying it the right way, Willie, because there's no support for Dr. Oz. His numbers are in the low 30s. He's a weak candidate. He comes from New Jersey. The joke is he's crossing the Tacony-Palmyra Bridge like everybody else coming down the shore. It's going down the shore in Philadelphia. He's not great, but this thing about the Dasha, her interview was wonderful technique.
Yeah.
She was soft. She was reasonable, and she asked reasonable questions of a guy who cannot answer the question because he has to look at the monitor. This is a great question. I mean, if the Republicans are smart, they'll say, how's this guy going to debate for Pennsylvania on the Senate floor? Is he going to bring a monitor on with him? I mean, they can be really rough. Now, so far, they're hitting him on crime. And even my brother was saying, I'm not going to a Phillies game. It's too dangerous to go downtown. And there's a lot of that talk in the suburbs. So they're going to tie him to crime and the long-term prisoners that he's defended. And they're going to tie him up with that. But still, you got a problem with Oz being from somewhere else, from Jersey.
I mean, literally, he had no idea what he was talking about. He had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah.
You know what they should do?
Yeah.
Fire him again.
I'd love that.
Fire the guy again.
It's really interesting to hear when someone make the statement of being like, this is probably what Republicans are going to do. Yeah, thanks for laying it out there for him, Chris. Like, yeah, like it almost seems as if that's kind of what you'd like them to go with, actually.
Wish casting, they call that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is also, yes, he's also saying it's a reasonable critique.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to say the Republicans are going to probably respond this way, and it's a completely disingenuous attack. But he doesn't do it.
Can you imagine if he were deaf, John Fetterman, and he needed to use transcription software and they were making the same argument? I mean, like, it's that basically the entire framing of this is immensely ableist, and he's still able to do the duties that he needs to do, but they're saying like, oh, he has to speak on the Senate floor with authority, which he should be able to. He's been speaking on the stump and still campaigning and is moving along and progressing in a very normal way according to his doctors, and so he still can do the job. I mean, this would be like making that critique if someone was blind or deaf, or Tammy Duckworth uses a wheelchair, saying, will she be able to stand with authority and speak on the floor of the Senate? It's absurd. And so the idea that he's praising that framing, like she opened her piece, the Dasha, the NBC reporter, by speculating that John Fetterman didn't understand what she said without any real hard evidence, and he ended up, he was able to communicate fine, and at one point he mixed up his words and said, well, this is the stroke talking. Like, yeah, he's been as transparent as possible on this.
Let's play Tucker Carlson responding to this.
Yeah.
Here we go.
John Fetterman is a trust fund kid. He took money from his parents deep into middle age when he decided finally what he would like to do with the rest of his life, which is to be the U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania. The problem is... I'm sorry,
can you pause it? The richness, no pun intended, of Tucker Carlson talking about someone else being a trust fund kid, where the only reason that he got into college when he had failing grades was because of parental relationships, one of his, I think, girlfriend at the time, right? And the reason he had a ton of money was because he's literally
his girlfriend was dean of the Tony private school he went to in Newport, Rhode Island, after he got kicked out of the Tony private school that he was going to in Switzerland. And the dean of that school, I can't remember, Saint Estefans or something like that, helped him get into Trinity College, where his parents were a member of the Diamond Club, which is the highest tier of giving
for populists
that you could do for populists at Trinity. And I should say that, like, they donated on top of his tuition about what would have been at that time about half of the donation of the tuition each year. So in other words, they paid 150% tuition each year that he was there.
Also, didn't he get advice from his dad saying, like, you can't really get one of these jobs in the public service, but do something in media because they'll take anybody? I feel like that was a direct quote from his dad, who ran Voice of America.
Yes. Yes.
All right, keep going.
And he can now no longer speak. He had a bad stroke, and we feel bad about that. Everyone does. But because of that stroke, Fetterman now needs electronic assistance in order to communicate with other people. He can't talk on his own. It's not a right-wing conspiracy theory. It's not QAnon. It's real. In fact, it's so real, his campaign concedes that it's real, that it's true. Fetterman uses a software program to understand the words of those around him and to formulate his responses to those words. In other words, to talk. Now, to be perfectly clear, this software is not a hearing aid. Fetterman doesn't need a hearing aid because he isn't deaf. He's not hearing impaired. Instead, this program takes words and then rearranges them into language that John Fetterman can understand, because his brain can no longer do that for him. Now, that's sad for transhumanists, though. It is thrilling. This is an amazing moment. This is Neil Armstrong on the moon. Here you have one of the most famous politicians in the country merging with a computer. This is the future they imagine. They're thrilled by it. But for everyone else, for the voters of Pennsylvania, for example, it does raise some obvious questions. For example, where exactly does the software end and John Fetterman's consciousness begin?
Oh, my God.
We don't know. We can't know. But it's obvious that Pennsylvania could very well be sending a computer program to the Senate where inevitably it will be hacked.
Wow.
Wait,
I mean,
what?
Yeah, the basic. So this is just like the plot of every robot sci-fi movie that he's now projecting out to John Fetterman.
Also Anchorman, when he's like, I'm Ron Burgundy.
Yes,
he reads everything he says on the prompter, word for word.
and it's also, I don't know if you have ever merged with your computer when you've put closed captioning on a video you have watched.
Right.
I've merged with my TV.
I started feeling really digital when I was put on the closed captions while watching Game of Thrones.
Yes, exactly. That closed captioning where you basically meld with the machine. And who knows where your consciousness begins and ends relative to that video you're watching.
My girlfriend always needs subtitles on. I didn't know it was because she was post-human.
Right. This is Ex Machina all over again. Hot robots stabbing people. That's what you want? This is the future the left wants.